welcome back to the Pew, everybody. I am your host, John Edwards, and I'm excited to be bringing you another episode of Just a Guy in the Pew this week. And this week, we have a treat for you. I'm being joined by a very good friend of mine, Father David Aufiero, and he is from the Diocese of Springfield, Massachusetts. He is the pastor of Holy Family Catholic Church there in South Deerfield, Massachusetts. And Father David and I met, it was a little over a year ago. He reached out. He was interested in getting something going for the men of his parish. He wanted to start a life-changing, vibrant ministry to men there. And so he reached out to us. We had some conversation. And then throughout the process of us meeting several times to train the men and to do all the work that we do there, we eventually made it there on December the 3rd of 2023 and helped them launch a group. And out of that, not only did we launch that group, but the Lord just launched a beautiful friendship between Father David and I. And he's been so gracious to agree to come on the show today. So, folks, without further ado, I just am excited to introduce you into my friend, Father David. Father David, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me today, John. Excellent.
Yeah, it's good to see you, man. I know we get to email a lot and we get to talk back and forth and text and all that stuff, but it's the first time we've actually been on a Zoom or something in a while, so it's good to see you, man.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and my mind is totally blown right now, but in a good way.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know you've listened to the podcast and stuff, and it was just such an honor to invite you to be on here, and that you said yes. You're such a wonderful priest and such a good man, and I've just enjoyed growing in a friendship with you, and just the time that we were able to spend together up in your parish and in the area. It was just such a gracious welcome and a wonderful place to do ministry. I love the parishioners there and the men in the group, and just excited to talk to you a little bit about that today. But every time that I have a priest or someone that's has a religious vocation, if you will, on, I love to hear a little bit about how they even got there. So, we're going to talk about men's ministry and your group and all that stuff, and I'm excited about it. But first, I'd love for the audience to hear a little bit about you and just kind of how you found your way to the priesthood.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to do that. So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, from this town called Revere, Massachusetts. And, I went into UMass Amherst, and that's on the other side of the state in Massachusetts. And, and as I was doing, UMass Amherst and going into civil engineering, that was my major in college, graduated in 2007 with a degree in engineering. All my internships were out there. And, and so the journey to priesthood was starting gradually. It's so ironic. It's so cool that you're asking me this question, because like last night, I had the pleasure of visiting Newman Catholic Center at UMass, and that's where I was very involved in as a student. And I shared my vocation story with some of the men there. There are about 22 men involved there, and it was a really cool thing. So originally from Boston, and and there are many different paths to the priesthood. And one of the path that I took the priesthood was I was a caddy. I was a good student, kind of involved with like friends and doing athletics and those kinds of things. So, but then there were also problems at home, and I kind of hid those problems well, because I was doing all those other things really well. Not that I hid them, but like no one really known me for that. And when I was in my junior year of high school at Mullen Catholic High School, I was evicted out of my house, and
Gosh.
It was a tough thing for my family. My grandmother died after 4 years. We were living with my grandmother. My dad had an aneurysm that ruptured in his head when I was 10 years old, and so for the next 4 years, we were living with my grandmother. And my grandmother died when I was 14, so 4 years of living with her. We had a year to leave. One of my family members, my uncle, was given power of attorney, and so we had a year to leave. And then what ended up happening was we got evicted, and and after we were evicted, we had a couple of different foster homes, and there was this really helpful, wonderful, cool priest named Father Michael Garino who was in our neighborhood. And a couple of my friends had encouraged me to go talk to Father Mike Garino. And of course, I didn't want to talk to him because, I have all these problems and I wasn't really going to church all that often. But I ended up talking to him about what was going on. And one of the things he said to me was, after about an hour, laughing, crying, telling him my whole story, he says to me, "Have you ever thought about becoming a priest?" I said, "No, I haven't." And as I kind of mentioned before, if you told me that a priest fell behind an altar, hit his head on the altar, started celebrating Mass, I would have said, "Oh, okay, great. That's where they come from." But no, it just goes to show that they come from stories, they have backgrounds, they have families, they have rough backgrounds, they have good backgrounds, everything in between, and they get sent to the altar. And in many years, not that I ever resisted it, but I was hesitant to enter into that call because I didn't want to run away and join the circus, so to say. I wanted to make sure this was really the Lord, and it wasn't just a reaction to a bad experience. And so throughout my time in high school and college, I got involved in college at the Newman Center, went to UMass, got involved in the Focus Missionary. I know they just had Seek, shout out to Focus. They got us involved with Bible study and catechism, and they had a vocation group up there in Newman Center, the Newman Catholic Center. And I got involved in that, and I was able to discern my vocation well. And right after college, I wanted to go right into the priesthood or right into the seminary afterwards. And so it was discerned well, went to UMass Amherst, tested the call. And then after 6 years of seminary, I got ordained on June 1st, 2013 in St. Michael's Cathedral. To make a long story short, here I am. I love ministry. I love the Diocese of Springfield. And whenever I have the chance, love sharing my story whenever I can. And hopefully it blesses someone.
Yeah, well, you just blessed me. I mean, what an amazing story. It's just to come from just difficult places like that, so much loss, with your father and your grandmother, and having to figure out, there for a year what you were going to do and where you're going to live and all that kind of stuff as a young man. I mean, that's a lot of suffering, and it goes to show that God can do anything, anywhere, in any circumstances. And that's I think the beauty of our faith is to hear that like even in the suffering, even in the hard times, God is present and he has a plan and he draws us to it. And thank goodness for that beautiful priest, right? That gave you the time and was there for you and mentored you. And, I could tell as I was listening to that when you were talking about how you opened up and shared, I know from just spending time with you, vulnerability is an important thing. You really love that. And I could see why that kind of drove you or attracted you to our ministry to help you with ministry of men in your parish, because I know just being with you were very open with me about some of the struggles that you face as a priest and some of the difficulties there. And obviously you were that way from a young age with Father there, being able to open up and tell him the truth of your life. And I think that's why it's so important for men, whether you're a priest, a lay person, or whatever, to be open. There's this idea in the world that men need to be, cut of granite and never have feelings and never have emotions and be the toughest guys in the world. But at the end of the day, we're all creatures with emotions and needs. And like you said, if we don't have places and outlets for those things, then we bury them. They become shameful. And as you said, a lot of people didn't really know me because of my situation and the things I didn't want to share. And that's often how a lot of men find themselves in trouble, and why we need places where men can go to be open and honest and to share. Well, hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the show this week. If you have been blessed by our ministry at all, I would humbly ask you to prayerfully consider becoming a monthly partner in the Pew by going to our website, justaguyinthepew.com, and clicking the donate button in the upper right corner. Your support will help us reach thousands more men through the podcast and through the life-changing groups we're starting for men in parishes all over the country and around the world. We can't do it without you, and every bit of your support helps. So please consider becoming a monthly partner in the Pew today. Thank you for your time and enjoy the episode. What a beautiful vocation story. It's powerful, and I'm glad that you're going and sharing that with young adults today, because Lord knows we need more priests.
Oh, don't we ever?
Yeah. Well, I just to kind of jump in a little bit to about the men's ministry and just how we came to know each other and everything. I believe it was, early in 2023 that we received a submission through our website one day, and it was from you, and you reached out and said, "Hey, I want to start a men's group in my parish." And really, John wants some help in trying to figure out how to do that. And, would love to talk to you about, what you have going on. And it's so beautiful to see a priest reach out and do that, because often, Father, honestly, for many years with the USCCB, men's ministry wasn't even really mentioned. You had women's ministry and youth ministry and young adult ministry and every other kind of ministry, but men's ministry wasn't really up there in the upper echelons of things that were listed as initiatives to drive. And as we both know, there's a lot of men that are simply checked out in the church and have struggled and aren't involved in the faith, or they've sort of abdicated that responsibility to be the spiritual leaders of their family. not because they've done it, with an intention of that, but because the world, the flesh, and the devil are very alluring. They call them into that, and again, men have been told to kind of walk by yourself and to be a one-man army and kind of do life on your own. So they find themselves away from those things. But you obviously saw there was a need there and wanted to do something about it. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And where I got to, not that I got to know you, but like where I first saw you was on this NCMC, I think National Conference, Men's Conference 2021. Sure. And so you were involved in, to rewind your life a little bit, in that virtual conference. I saw that whole thing. You were on there, Chris Stefanik. There were all these different speakers that really spoke, and I really enjoyed every single one of those speakers. Now, where you kind of stood out, as a speaker, was, your own story, your own vulnerability. I'm sure that your listeners have heard it time and time again. You came across as such a regular guy. You came across as a guy that was never, quite frankly, in trouble a day in his life. But then here you are, you're doing all, I think you kind of shared with the folks that you were in jail. You struggled a little bit, and it just spoke to me, like saying that, like, that could have been any man in my parish. Just because things look okay on the outside doesn't mean they necessarily are. And so there is a need to kind of be vulnerable with one another, be vulnerable before the Lord, and then ultimately that helps to kind of strengthen that. So that was 2021 where I first saw you. And then 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of working on Eucharistic Congress in my diocese, and really enjoyed that. It was a really wonderful thing. And we had this whole National Eucharistic revival happening in the United States, and we had the National Eucharistic Congress took place this summer. Amazing Congress, just a joyful experience. And I had the pleasure of doing that in my own diocese. And as we were getting to the end of the of the whole entire Eucharistic Congress, I was thinking to myself, okay, like, what are the next steps? Where do I want to go? What I want to do? What's next with this? Of course, we all want to see a younger church. We want to see more youth in our church. Is this the direction that we want to go in? Do I want to really dive into youth ministry? Do I want to do that again? And and that's a really exciting ministry for people who are doing it. God bless you. That takes a lot of stamina. It takes a lot of drive, and it's wonderful because the kids are exciting, and it's an exciting thing. And I still dabble in that. It's amazing. I love it. But what really kind of came to me in prayer was men's ministry, because you swim upstream a little bit, and I think one of the struggles that I shared last night at the Newman Center that I shared with you, I'll share in your podcast, was in my line of work. Once they hit confirmation, you kind of don't see them again. You know what I mean? More Sure. often than not. And especially in the trajectory of my own priesthood, going every 2 years and then going to another parish, God's grace, God allows it, and that's his path. But you don't see necessarily the fruit of your work. And there's no telling whether that fruit is going to take place, because in my research and my discernment, you look at these statistics, 93% of kids, when they see their father go to church, they end up going to church. And 17% when it's just the mother goes to church, they end up going to church. And then 3%, if they're left to their own devices, they go to church. So it kind of, that statistic was kind of in my research and in my discernment of where we would want to go. And so, but then men's ministry was the thing, because you swim upstream a little bit. If you get the men, right, and you get the fathers, they can in turn go back and evangelize their kids. They can evangelize their families, and they can strengthen them. If we devote sort of that little time, because kind of living in a culture that can be a challenge, that maybe portrays men a certain way. It's not necessarily the way that God sees it, and it's not the truth of what God vision is for manhood, for fatherhood, for being a husband and a father, and being the man of the family. It's not God's vision for it. And so creating that space where they can be encouraged to have that. And so not only are you strengthening them, you put that investment to them, you strengthen the family as well. And so I saw that sort of as that need. It kind of came to me through inspiration, and looked at the statistics and looked at the research to kind of back it up. And I also have another friend named Joe Austin, who works in the diocese, and he's part of Office of Young Adult and Youth Ministry last year. Now he's part of the Office of Discipleship and Mission. And I gave him a call and I said, hey, what do you think of men's group? And is this something we want to pursue in the church as well? He said, hey, Father Dave, that's where you want to go, and that's a really great place to go as well. And he does a lot of amazing things in youth ministry, and he also is very active in men's ministry as well. So that's sort of where the inspiration came from. And then by dumb luck, John, I got to look on the internet. Maybe a God instance as opposed to dumb luck, but I went on the internet and looking on men's ministry, and then seeing Just a Guy in the Pew. I saw you on Just a Guy in the Pew, and then I looked back at wait a minute, this guy looks familiar, NCMC, and I said, oh my gosh. So here's the website. And as I was thinking about the men's group, I was thinking, well, we need to do service. That's an important thing. We need to, have meaningful conversation. How do we do that? Maybe through a video, maybe through reading a book. That's a thing. We need to pray. That's a thing. And, and we need to kind of hang out too. And that's the thing. But how do we bring it all together? I was having trouble bringing it all together. And then, that's when I reached out to you. I saw what you were doing, the groups that you were doing on Just a Guy in the Pew, and the pillars that you had, formation, fellowship, service, and worship. And then submitted that request to you. And then you came and you told me your whole story and told me about the pillars. And that's sort of what I was wrestling with and coming to grips with. And then it made so much sense when you said it, and it made it like it was it just kind of made sense. Now, the difference between like getting a men's ministry or men's group, even with like 7 guys, compared to like planning a whole Eucharistic Congress, in my opinion, planning a sustained men's group was actually a little more daunting, because getting guys to commit to things can be a tough thing, because they're busy, they have families, they have a bunch of things going on. But we put it out there, followed the steps that you had, got the men, chose the men to be the leaders, and just went through the different steps and the different process. It was a step-by-step process, and it was good to go through that, because going through that process that you have before you come out and do the parish mission is a way to sustain the ministry. Because I think one of the things we talked about was you can go to an event, like putting an event on in the church, is difficult in and of itself, but then it's like, where do people have a place to go after that? You know what I mean? You shoot up, the whole Jesus roller coaster, you get inspired, and then where do you have a place to land? And so that's an important piece. So that men's group sort of provides that place to land. And there's been a lot of good fruit from it, a lot of good formation as well in a short period of time, really. And just, we've only been doing it for a year, and it's the quality has been very good. We're working on how do we expand it? How do we reach out? How do we make sure that everybody feels invited so they can come? But the fruit in the early going has been quite good.
Well, it's so good to hear that, Father. Thank you for sharing all that, because I mean, that's exactly what we want to hear. One of the things people ask me, and even other speakers sometimes say, man, you really invest a lot of time in working with these parishes for a while before you get there. And, you're not just going and giving a talk. And that's because I just felt the Lord call me in my life to say, like, bear fruit that lasts. If you're going to go somewhere, if you're going to leave your family, if you're going to go out and to speak and do all these things, then go beyond that, right? Help them, build community that lasts and fruit that lasts beyond it. We know in John 15, the Lord says that I have called you to bear fruit and fruit that lasts, right? So not just a drop in a bucket, as you say, or a moment where maybe you find some inspiration, but then the world and the flesh and the devil starts to pound on you again, and that inspiration goes out the window as quickly as it came. But a place where you can then have a place to go every week, to go back and be refreshed and be renewed and to build those relationships and friendships. So it's so good to hear you say that, because that's our hope. Like, that's what we hope that everybody sees in this, is that it's not just an event, it's an opportunity to build a place for your men, to your point, to build up the men, and then to build up their families, and then to build up the church and the society around us. I really do agree with everything you said there, that as long as men check out, as long as they pull themselves off of the chessboard, and a lot of times, again, it's unwittingly, they don't even realize they're doing it. But as the more men stay on the sidelines, the more the church is going to struggle. And so I think it's just so beautiful that you took the initiative and saw that there was an issue there. Didn't just say, well, let's just throw something at it and see if it sticks. You did the time and the research to be able to look and say, like, what answers are there to establish something beyond just an event? And And so, it was so great to get to work with you to do all that. And, a couple of things you said in there were just how important ministry to men is to guys. And you said, it shouldn't just be about service. I know that's something in the church for a very long time. That's kind of where men have been regulated to, right? Like men will show up, they volunteer for things, they cook stuff, they, put on drives for different things, all things that are needed. But men kind of get shoehorned into that like service only thing, right? We'll call them in when we need some furniture moved or when we need this happening or whatever. And there's so much more that just like anyone else that men need, that's one piece of the needs of a man, right? There's a wholeness to a person, and every one of us wants every different part of us to be ministered to. And so like, for so many men, that's what I hear is like, I want to get more involved, but we don't have anything spiritual. It's mostly service. And while I like doing those things, I want to be challenged. I want to be taught. I want to be walked with to grow in my faith. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that because that's what we're trying to provide in those groups and hopefully what you've seen in yours.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the men are entering into the pillars, and it's been good for them to have that camaraderie going into the different pillars. And, and for the service part, yeah, it's definitely, it's good that they provide the service. They love doing it. They're working with their hands, they're working together, working on teams, all those kinds of things. But then it's also important to have time for fellowship, time for formation, time to just kind of pray. That gets into the whole entire formation of really making disciples, you know what I mean? And that definitely propels people into the greater engagement, greater need that we have in the church to make those disciples so that they can be more involved and lead their families and do all those kinds of things that we need them to do. Yeah.
Sure. So have you seen that that's helped with like getting guys that you didn't think would show up before or things like that? Because I remember there was one gentleman the night after I gave my story, that Friday night, we always do Friday and Saturday restored missions. And there was a gentleman that showed up, I believe, with his father-in-law that had been struggling in a lot of different things. And he mentioned that, he didn't even really want to go into church, but he had seen and heard that the story would be about addiction and things like that. So he showed up. And I know that he talked about wanting to look for a place to belong. And so I know that this reaches different people, so often when we have Bible studies or Lectio Divina groups or things that are more on the end of, let's say, formation and worship, a lot of times that's intimidating to guys, right? Because they may not be in that place. They see themselves as very shameful, or you don't know what I've done, or if I go to that, I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb, because they just assume that everybody in the room is, a biblical scholar and that they're the most holy people in the world. But to be honest, we all struggle. And so when you're just offering those type things, sometimes guys who want and have a desire to go never wind up showing up because they're worried that, I'm not going to be welcomed, or I'm not going to fit in, or their shame weighs them down. So what have you seen, like in the different processes of the 4 pillars that we help you launch there? What do you think helped, what does it look like? Has it helped you bring new people in? Has it gotten men excited about continually coming every week? What's your take on that?
Yeah, definitely. So we come from, it's a smaller rural parish. And so we are looking for, making sure that everyone feels invited and quantity and that kind of thing. But what I did see was, I mentioned earlier, was definitely the quality has improved and it's gotten different. And definitely that excitement for coming every week, it has certainly been a thing. And entering into the 4 pillars has certainly been formative for people. And then really the camaraderie and that kind of thing has been also formative as well. There's been, what I would say is that people have definitely grown in their faith. We have a lot of good men that took a definite step forward. And there's been greater engagement, like when they go to this ministry, to the men's group, there's been greater engagement. It seems to me there's been greater engagement in the other groups of the parish, So, there was, it seemed like there was, they had going into that camaraderie, going into that, in the formation. I had one guy, he got himself confirmed. I didn't realize he wasn't confirmed. He got confirmed, got his marriage blessed in the church. Another guy, there were just other processes that kind of took place. There are 3 people in the men's group who are thinking about becoming deacons, and just even thinking about. Yeah, and when you have the results in terms of the quality have been quite good, and at different various points at different various times. Not that I want to share everyone's story on it, but like guys have been helped out, and also we started as a result of doing the men's group. We kind of got into other things too. Access 90 in addition to the men's group, and people kind of grew in their understanding of prayer and fasting, and how those asceticisms can really take place. But then there's been more vulnerability and more sharing, and then it just kind of piggybacks on itself and does all and gets into the lives of the men, and helping us kind of grow that way. But there's definitely been sort of that quality has taken place, and I've noticed that the willingness to kind of serve in different capacities, and sort of the level of engagement, like discussions in different parish meetings have been brought up and elevated in terms of people sharing and wanting to serve, and not really having to pull too many teeth to look for volunteers.
Sure.
And then, we worked together in December, and because we were working every week, praying, the men were working every week, praying, going to formation, worship, service. We're at a point now where we also launched a women's group just a couple months later in March.
Wow.
Yeah, we had another mission in Lent, and then in the summer they started. They got together and worked together and built the women's group up, and that's been going for a couple months now. And they want to do service, they want to do worship. The men had a meet and greet. The women, I don't think maybe a meet and greet is for them necessarily, but they could do a women's wine and cheese. You know what I mean? And so there are different, that they're doing, and they're growing in their own sort of discipleship. They open up the scripture and they sit around and they talk about it, and it sounds like they have really lively, wonderful, engaging discussions. You know what I mean? They're so good at that. And the men, we have the 4 pillars, and the women are getting into those 4 pillars as well, as is appropriate for them and their women's groups and the thing that they want to do. So there's been greater engagement, and a year later, the group is we get 8 to 10 guys. So again, it's a small rural parish, but now, and it's only been going on for a year, but now it's like getting that invitation out, making sure that the invite is out, getting the outreach out. You know what I mean? And if you're doing outreach for your men's ministry, that's going to get you more confident into doing outreach for evangelization, outreach for the church in general. It seems to me that's sort of a good stepping stone. I also noticed that, and then the ministries are taking place too. We're going to get a whole volunteer fair going, and encouraging people to really kind of dig in and make a home at the parish. And I've had a guy really look into revamping CCD, and he's been a DRE, terrific for us, and really engaging with the families in that as a result of going into men's group. Now my deacon, I don't know if he's I haven't spoken with him about this yet, but a year after men's group, he's starting a bereavement group, and I can only imagine the prayers and the formation and that kind of thing have helped propel that forward, helped to make that thing kind of go forward. I don't want to claim that necessarily from the men's group, but
Sure.
but I would that the grace would be there. But definitely want to highlight that the men have been in a different place, and we have 3 diaconal candidates, and I think for me the quality has been greater than what I could have asked for, and I can't take any credit for that. I think that would come from the Holy Spirit.
Well, amen. I can't either, right? We just do what he asks us to do and show up, and he makes it work. And I was so blessed the other night to get that email from you, where you were just sharing those guys going in the diaconate. You talked about a guy losing his job, and because of his relationships in the group, finding another job. So much fruit, and like you said, it's not like this is a 3,500 family or person parish, right? I mean, this is a small parish. I think you have how many families?
I go by counting on the weekends. We get about 220 people per weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a huge parish, but yet you're finding fruit in that. And that's one thing that a lot of times people could say, well, we don't have a big parish, and we're rural, and we don't this and we don't that. And we can sort of, talk ourselves out of doing anything because of those things. But you stood up and said, no, the people here, no matter how little or how large of a parish are, they deserve help. They deserve something. And so kudos to you for stepping up and doing that. And for the women's thing, it's funny, like everybody looks at us as just a men's ministry, but there's all sort of women that listen to the podcast. And then my own wife started a women's group at our parish after she saw what had come from the men, and they run the 4 pillars too. So it can work for anybody. Just like you mentioned with Exodus 90, we didn't do this to try to compete with other people and say like, well, don't do that man as you, or don't do this, or don't do. No, the whole point of the structure is that it's about the methodology. It's about helping you with the structure and helping you build leaders so that you can equip and then accompany people. And then it's free to you to use whatever you want. If you like Exodus 90, there's no reason you can't use it on your formation nights. If you like that man as you, there's no reason you can't use it on your formation night. The reason we go to start these aren't to plant a bunch of just a guy in the pew flags all over the country. It's to give people the tools that they lack. What our church really struggles with is accompaniment, right? It's accompaniment. And that's not just for lay people. I mean, even with priests. I mean, I speak to priests all the time, and priests feel very isolated and alone, and they're kind of out, running their silo, if you will, or their parish and things like that. But there's not often a lot of community and a lot of just accompaniment alongside each other as priests, unless you're from an order or something, right? And so I think that the beauty of this is it's creating all of that. And I'm so glad to hear in your parish. And I guess it was last year, you sent me, and one of the questions people always say to me is, well, John, we're in a small area. What about service? Like, we don't have a Catholic Charities, to go and box up food that's, around the corner. That's 2 hours away or an hour and a half away. And that's going to be hard to do on one of these nights where we meet. You're asking people to give up 6 hours. And when are they going to do that? But you guys found unique ways to go and serve. And I remember last year you sent me an email with some beautiful pictures of you and the guys going and serving a war veteran, an older war veteran, and his wife that basically weren't able to handle yard work, and their yard had gotten a little out of control, and they weren't able to obviously bring in people to do that, and you guys found a way to help them. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they were very involved in the parish, Ann and Bill Bononi, and very involved in the parish. And like you said, they weren't able to do kind of their yard work. So for one of our service nights, we went out and we did yard work for them. And the men got together, we teamed up, 7 or 8, 9 of us, kind of went out there, and we just kind of made a lot of hands-made light work. It took us like a solid hour and a half to kind of do it, even a little more than that. We mowed the grass, we cut the bushes. She had a Marian garden. We cleaned up that whole Marian garden. We got all the clippings. We got it around the corner. And then, after about an hour and a half or so, she came out with a couple of bottles of soda. We had that, and just kind of, has cookies, soda, that kind of thing, some chips. We went in and visited with Bill, and then that's when we took the picture, the group photo, and we had Bill in the photo. My seminarian, I wanted my seminarian in the picture, but I think he ended up taking the picture, and I had him for the summer, so we got to see how the men's group was working, and really enjoyed it. And we really sort of enjoyed him. So that was sort of one of the service nights, getting the parishioners up. And then we moved, like a bunch of us, we moved the whole manger scene. And when I talk about like the fathers kind of getting involved and kind of networking with other fathers, when we moved the manger, we kind of did that. The head guy for our the head coordinator for the men's group now, his name is Mark, and he got a couple of fathers involved to lift this big heavy manger for Christmas. And not only did he get the fathers, they also got his sons involved too. So you kind of see that kind of trickling down. And for me, that whole thing has just been super great and really good to see. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm so glad to hear that it's worked there. That's my prayer, is that, Lord, whatever wherever we go, whatever we're doing, whether it's, the missions or if it's leadership summits, but launching these groups, Lord, that you would lift up these men. I mean, that's the thing, Father. I think you've said it a couple times in different ways, but men want something more than just going to church on Sunday. They need more than that. And they really have to get back past this place of believing that, like, I can't help, that the church doesn't need me, that what can I do? Most men don't even understand their gifts to know how they can help. And that's the beauty of this, is finding these ways where men can simply join this team, be lifted up with other brothers, because it shouldn't fall on one person to have to do themselves. That's often why groups fail, is because, one guy gets inspired, or father looks at the guy that shows up for everything and says, hey, we need a men's group, and you do it. And then the guy has all the pressure on himself. And he burns out over time or whatever. So having these different group of men, like you said, that Mark was the main coordinator, but he's got guys that are running these other nights that make it simpler and easier for him to be able to coordinate, and that load is shared between the different guys. But really what it does is its core is it allows guys to believe there's an opportunity for them to find a place to help, to be a gift not only to others, but to receive gifts from others for themselves, and to build that authentic friendship. And so one of the last things I really want to talk to you about here, and this is what I love about you, you're so gracious and open with your heart and just what it's like to be a priest. But, I remember, when I was working with you, one of the people that were most excited about this whole thing was you. And it wasn't just like, I've got a place to go for the men, for my men to go, and I'm going to let them have it. And I'm just going to kind of, exit stage left and let them kind of do everything. You were just as excited as they were to be involved in it and to be a part of it, not to run it. I mean, obviously on a worship night, those guys can't transubstantiate. So like you do that, you're there for that. But it's important also, I think, for people to know that like what this meant to you, and that this wasn't just something where you were just to show up and do your part and leave, Father, but it's a place that really you wanted to embrace too. And I saw that from the tears in your eyes when we were there talking about all this and the need that you had to have a community of men to be able to belong to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that went back to what I was talking about earlier, like being involved in the Eucharistic Congress and seeing sort of the Lord's hand in that was such an amazing accomplishment, such an amazing feat. But then where do we go from there? And having that discernment and going into the men's conference, like into the men's group, it was definitely, the camaraderie most definitely for them. And then we can probably, I was thinking we could probably, kind of share that as well, like journeying together in this road towards all of us, just kind of building the community up, So it was, it was honestly, it was very, very meaningful. But I was most excited for the fact that, we had this discernment, we had this encouragement, we had this whole process that we went into, and and I think that I think that it's also important for them like to support each other, both the priests and the other men, and then we can kind of journey together. I mean, those are all things that I was looking forward to, seeing how it all kind of developed. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's one thing that I noticed in our parish when we launched this. It's been 3 pastors ago in our group because it's been 9 years. But like I noticed that we had a really cool pastor that he was amazing. He loved everything. He was at every sporting event. If he came to your house to watch football, he's having a couple beers and having fun and all that stuff. But a lot of men, if they didn't know him, they still kind of shied away because, we put our priests on pedestals, right? Like they're holy. I'm not. Like, I don't want to get close to them because of whatever reasons. They might see who I really am instead of whatever facade I put up or things like that. And so we sort of separate ourselves from the priests. But one thing that I've seen that's beautiful in the groups we start around the country with the priests like yourself that really embrace this is it breaks down those walls, right? Especially for men that aren't living as the spiritual leaders of their family. They can have this idea that every time Father walks up, he's going to get on me for not being at Mass or for not this or for not that. And it sort of breaks down those walls and allows a priest to come in and to build that opportunity with those men, those relationships, but also for the priest. I mean, it's not like you guys walk around and you're impervious to the attacks of the devil or the things that, that men face, right? I mean, you're intrinsically different than us, but you still face the same temptations, the same struggles, the same issues. And, if you're the only priest at a parish out in the middle of a distance away from people, right, out in the middle of nowhere or a long distance from getting to other parishes and brotherhood, I think it's important for priests to have those places too to go to. I mean, what would you think about that or say about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, like, the work that we did together definitely, made me think about how we can kind of build up that basically a men's group for priests. And this past summer, I went to Steubenville, Ohio, Franciscan University of Steubenville. I went to the Priest Deacon Seminarian Conference out there. And I did that, and the whole conference, it was amazing. It was a great time. But then I was wondering, what can I bring back to my diocese? And then this guy named Father John Kiley, he stands up and he starts talking about fraternity of priests. I'm like, there it is. And so we had a conversation with him, and kind of like the way you and I were working together, getting the men's group going. I work with Father John Kyler. We talked about it, talked about what the issues were, why we didn't have one, why we didn't have a group, and then we ended up, we just talked about it. I got a couple. I made a bunch of phone calls. I was able to get 2 other guys, and with that, we went out. We had a retreat. There was 4 of us on the retreat, and then from there in Advent, we just kind of started our own little men's group for priests, and then what it was, and that's not like 10 or 15 guys, but we're growing, and we're growing one by one, and we simply pray. We talk about what the Lord is doing in our heart during that prayer, and then we just kind of pray for each other's intentions, and it's a very productive 2 hours. It kind of models the fraternity of priests structure, and and the guys, the other priests, including myself, that has been a very very fruitful and a very just positive experience for everybody. Everyone enjoys it. Everyone marks it down. They're committed to it. We have a little text messaging, a little group text that we just kind of talk like when's our next meeting. We meet once a month for that, but then when we stay in touch with text, then we also go on Zoom call. So for the priest group, we meet every other week, and and there's a geographical distance. That's a thing. There's multi-parish ministry, so that's a thing, and it's new, and so that's a thing. But right now, the every other week model, where we meet once in person, then we meet another time in Zoom every other week, and then back to in person. That's been working well, and it's been really great for folks. And and we have a meeting today. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'll pray for you all. It's so exciting to hear that, you sent me another text or an email that said, I've been inspired by this men's group to do something for my brother priest and for myself. And like you said, the deacon is started something out of it. And it's so good. It's so great. I mean, that's what we want to hear. And, one thing you mentioned a couple of times, as we wind down here is, we've got 8 to 10 guys, or it's not this many or whatever. And what I often tell myself, and I know you share this thought process too, is sometimes we can get caught up in because we're men and we've been told our whole life that we are what we can achieve or show for our work, that if we don't have 100 guys meeting a week, that it's not a successful thing. But, Jesus started with 12. Jesus went and found one, and then another, and then a couple more, and assembled 12. And those 12 men changed the world. So
right.
I often, sometimes the devil will try to tempt me in that way and go, well, there aren't, as many people at the mission as what, we thought would be, or there are not as many men in the men's group as what we had hoped for right from the beginning. But what I've learned over the 9 years of doing this is don't question what God puts in front of you, right? You minister to the people that are there. And if you have 12 guys, or 10 guys, or 8 guys, or 15 guys, or 4 priests, that's 4 more that were meeting together before you decided to do something, right? And so we make an impact. It's like throwing that pebble in the lake and then watching the ripple effect. It may not make it to the other side instantly, but along the way, it's going to encounter so many things and so many bump up against so many things to where it's going to continue to bear fruit. And so I just say that because I want to encourage any man that's out there that may say, well, we have a small parish, or I'm not the right guy, or we may not have enough people for it to really matter. Well, you've sat here for about 40 minutes or so listening to the testimony of a wonderful priest and who has a small parish and who still decided in the face of all of those objections, I'm sure, that came into his mind or that he shared here. And yet he still moved forward in boldly saying, we're going to do this. And now, a year later, there's fruit that's being born because of your yes, Father. And so I thank you for that and for being just such a good witness. I oftentimes the devil comes for me sometimes when I'm sitting, and I say oftentimes and sometimes, he does a lot. So I just contradicted myself there. But sometimes I'm in this office or just in the midst of a mass or something, the devil's like, what are you really impacting? What is your work really doing? And almost always I get a text from you or an email on those times and say, hey, John, listen to this, listen to that. Look what happened here. These guys are becoming deacons. Look at this, look at that. And so I thank you for, keeping this relationship going. We're always here for y'all, and we tell it to all our groups. Anything we can ever help with, we're here for. And Father, I really am so appreciative of you and your heart for the men and just your heart for the flock in general, helping the women there and everything that you're doing, your brother priest and encouraging the men to become deacons. And, this wouldn't have worked the way that I think it had if it hadn't been for your passion and for your longing for it. And then even your participation, again, not as somebody that's running the whole thing, but somebody that's
Right.
coming alongside the men and encouraging and getting as much out of it as they are.
Amen. And I did mention like the quantity a couple of times. I think the reason why I did it was success looks like, our definition of success could be different than what the Lord sees. Although you don't have the quantity, it doesn't substitute the quality, because the quality is excellent. Three guys thinking about being a deacon and even mentioning it and all the different things that kind of came from it. I guess that I was just trying to echo that encouragement too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Quality was a thing. I hope I didn't sound self-defeating.
Oh, no, and I wasn't trying to point that out for that you did anything out of sorts. It's just a lot of people get hung up on that. I know I did in the beginning when I thought like we had 50 or 60 coming, and then the numbers dropped a little bit, and this was way before we instituted the 4 pillars. We were just showing up every week and kind of griping about how bad our lives were, and we weren't doing anything about it. But the numbers would drop, and I found myself often going, well, we don't have this many, so we're not as successful, or we don't have this many, or was not as successful. And I had the pastor of my parish and several other people in ministry, John, like, stop looking at it like that. If you're affecting one person, you're affecting their family, you're affecting those around them, and you have no idea what's going to happen, right? That priest that took the time to walk with you early on in your life, he had no idea the fruit that would bear. And now here you are, years later, and you're doing all these wonderful things you've mentioned, including being a part of this men's group, but so much other stuff that you've done that bears fruit. And he took time to pay attention to one young man that needed his help and his guidance. Right. And so I didn't point that out, to go like, Father, don't mention quantity. I did it just because I want people to understand that our call is to do what God asks us and not to worry about, the results, but just to worry about what he asks us. And you've certainly done that, Father. And I so appreciate your friendship and just all your prayers and all those things. I know that you have mine. I pray for you often, and have enjoyed our encounters of just the two of us on Zooms, sharing our lives together and the things that we're dealing with and being there as brothers, as my father and my brother. I really appreciate that.
Amen. Happy to journey with you, man. And no, it's been amazing. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, and thank you for all those wonderful things you just said.
Yeah, well, Father, you're a gift to the church, and I hope that the Lord raises up more and more like you. I really do, because we need good priests, and we need to be there for our priests, right? We don't need to treat you guys like a drive-through window. We need to be there supporting y'all, right there with you, and building places where you can find that accompaniment as well that you guys sorely need. So, Father, it's been great to be with you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you're doing. I know you had to take time out of a busy schedule to join us here, so thank you for that. And again, just God bless you for supporting those men and supporting their parish in the way that you do. And I hope that my travel brings me back up somewhere that way, so we can get back together again real soon.
Amen. Yeah, that could happen soon. Yeah, for sure. Make it happen.
All right. Well, thank you, Father. You and your parish will be in your prayers. Please say hello to all the men for me. Give them my love, and let me know if there's anything you guys need along the way. We're here to help.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that, John. We'll be in touch for sure. Yeah.
All right. God bless you.
God bless.